New adaptations and remakes can revive stories that have been forgotten and bring its popularity back to life. But sometimes, dead is better. Hey everyone, welcome to the Movie Buffs podcast for another episode of A Discussion About. For the first time ever, I am your host, David, and here with me today is my brother, Steven.
Hey everyone.
And my friend, Steven T.
Hey everyone.
It's not repetitive at all.
We're both using the hey everyone.
We got a great episode for you today, and we are all very excited, so we're going to just jump right into it. As mentioned on previous episodes of the Movie Buffs are implementing a new segment in which one of our members takes a movie that he absolutely hated or was disappointed by and tells us what could have been done to take that disappointing movie and transform it into one of the best movies ever. Today, the entire episode will be given to my brother, Steven.
Hey everyone.
Steven, do you want to tell us which movie you will be dissecting for today?
Yes. So I believe I mentioned it a couple episodes ago when Stephen T did his dissection of It Chapter 2. But for anyone who didn't watch that episode, I will be dissecting or analyzing or improving, whichever word you want to use for this, Stephen King's 2019 version of Pet Sematary.
Whoa, okay. Excellent. Before we give the rest of our time to Steven,
That's me.
my brother, yeah, I would like to briefly discuss this movie. Steven T and myself actually have never seen Pet Sematary, and we both watched it specifically for this episode. So I would just like to give some time for Steven and I to share our thoughts of it. Steven, do you want to get the ball rolling for this?
Yeah, sure. I'll start. I'm not going to take too much attention. This isn't a review or anything. I'm just going to start off by saying that I didn't like the movie at all. I was bored for majority of it. There were so many things that I would have done differently to make it better. So I wonder what Stephen C is going to pick. I also think that this is probably one of the worst films I've seen that year. Like, I didn't see it the year it came out. I saw it this year, but like, I would have added that to the list of like, whoa, that was just terrible. So like, and it's sad because like, you know, it has one of my favorite actresses in it. You know, you can't always get what you want. So, you know, but that's just how I feel about the movie. What about you, David?
Before David goes into his thing, I'm just really like, okay, I'm glad. Well, not glad. I don't know what word to use, but it's interesting that you didn't like it because now I'm really curious on your thoughts on what I would do to improve it.
Oh well, yeah. Let's see what happens. But then again, I mean, I'm not like I'm not that harsh of a critic. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like,
No, dude. A big part of me was also preparing for like to be mind blown. Like, dude, what are you talking about? I liked it, and I was gonna be like, what?
I was going to do that as a joke and be like, I can't believe you didn't like this movie at all. This was really good, you know. But
Cinema. Okay.
Now, I would say I'm less harsh as a critic than both of you, actually, because I found this movie to be a little enjoyable. Now, that being said, I don't think it's perfect. I only gave it 3 stars on my letterbox. There's a lot of things you can do to improve it, but yeah, I mean, when my brother was rewatching the movie for this episode, I just stayed with him because I thought, wow, I mean, it's a movie.
Which means he watched it twice, which is totally fine if you liked it.
I found it to be entertaining, personally. Yeah. All right, well,
wow.
With all of these thoughts shared, we will now let Steven take over the rest of this episode. As a quick reminder, for anyone who is not a fan of listening to criticism on a movie that you may have loved, if you're uncomfortable with people saying bad things about a movie you may have liked, this may not be the episode for you. However, if you're open about listening to other people's opinions on a movie without getting offended, then stay tuned. Warning, there will be spoilers for Pet Sematary, the 1989 version, Pet Sematary 2019, as well as the novel by the same name, shockingly, Pet Sematary. Once again, spoiler warning, and now with that said, Steven, the floor is yours.
The entire floor?
The entire floor.
I'm kidding. Okay, so thank you, David.
No problem.
Thank you for having me here. I've never been on the movie books before.
It's nothing really, you know.
Anyway, so I'm going to start this discussion with acknowledging the fact that I am a huge Stephen King fan. I think that needs to be said. He is my favorite author, and I believe most of his stories have been given the label of iconic. He really is the king of horror. Again, opinion, but to me that rings true. He's the king of horror. And heck, I don't think I've seen a Stephen King book without New York Times bestseller printed on the cover. So like he makes a ton of money on off of his books, and they're obviously being read by many people. And not only that, but like they stick with you. A lot of these iconic characters come from the books he wrote back in the 70s, in the 80s, and they're still relevant today, and they still resonate with a lot of its audience. So needless to say, his stories are very unique, and they have themes and messages that are just so much deeper than the story itself. And when it comes to the 2019 version of Pet Sematary, I feel like that's what the movie missed. It lacks substance. And everything that the movie took from the book only managed it. The movie only managed to scratch the surface of how powerful and how haunting the elements from this book were supposed to actually be. So, and actually, like Stephen King actually said that Pet Sematary is the darkest story he has ever written. And for those who have read the book, I'm sure you would agree, because like this story, it's not about like bringing people back from the dead and they're evil. This story is about like mourning and the fact, the true horrors that come with losing a loved one, and the concept of death, and how far would you go to bring back a loved one. Those are the things that it's supposed to be focusing on, and I don't think the movie really emphasized it as much as other versions have. So I think anyway, like I think I just pretty much explained my biggest problem with the movie with this little introduction. But the movie, of course, has multiple flaws, and that feed into that main issue that I just mentioned of it having a lack of substance. And some of those flaws, I'm just going to list them off to help organize myself. The flaws include the film's pacing, the way that the characters were handled, and the effects and the violence of the film. So I'm going to dig into those three. Those three I think are the main things that feed into the main issue that I just mentioned of it having a lack of substance. So the pacing, let's start with that. It's too fast. It's way too fast. Like, the family moves from Boston to this place. I want to say it's Derry, but it's not. I know that that's like an It reference that the movie had, but
Yeah, it's not Derry.
it's not Derry. It's this one secluded area, and it feels like if the movie feels more like it's a summary of the book rather than interpretation of the book, onto film. So it's just too fast, and being too fast is one thing, but it also feels like it is obvious that these things were supposed that there more that was supposed to be explained or dug into a little deeper, and it's obvious that things were just cut out from the film in the editing process. Like I know that there are films that the pacing's too fast, but it still feels natural. It feels like nothing's being left out. Yeah, it's moving quickly. Like whoa, we escalated that was 0 to 100 real quick, but this one straight up feels like, weren't we supposed to know more about this? Wait, what about this character? Wait, what's going on? What? Type of thing. Well, at least that's how I felt. I know that this is sounding like, oh, it just should have been like the book. Yeah, I guess I guess that's what I'm saying. I did read the book first, so it's interesting. But it is interesting that Stephen and David, who hadn't read the book, still didn't really like the movie. Well, David did.
Yeah, I found it to be quite enjoyable.
Quite enjoyable. But let's see if I can change your mind. Well, not change your mind, but see
Okay,
if
I hate the movie. Okay,
see if my
you win.
improvements help. So for pacing wise, those are my main issues. That it's too fast, and it feels like things were cut out, so it didn't really give the characters that much depth. And now moving on to the second main issue, the characters. And the characters I'm going to focus on that I feel were just not given the right amount of screen time and the right amount of justice were Judd and Lewis's friendship. That was never, ever really explored in the film. So, and in the book, they have so much more to their friendship and to the way that they, talk to each other and the trust that they have with each other. In the book, they were actually good friends. And in this movie, it feels like Judd is just the old man, the crazy old man that lives next door that's like, oh, I can bring your cat back if you want. Like, type of thing. Like, I know a place where that's not, well, I mean, I guess it works for the movie to an extent because I do want to say that the cast was brilliant. I do love the cast, and I think anything that John Lithgow is in, he'll do his best, and he really is the highlight. I think it's safe to say that John Lithgow, Judd's character in the film, was my favorite thing about it. And Jason Clarke as Lewis, again, beautiful casting. but I feel like their talents were just wasted because this movie again was very on the surface. It never really dug deep to any of the things that are meant to be explored. And I know that it sounds repetitive when saying that, but if for those who have read the book, you'll know what I'm saying. It's an injustice that this movie did because it's just all surface, no actual deep things that are supposed to stick with you and that story that haunts you and actually gets you to self reflect. So, and adding more about Judd and Lewis's friendship, I think would have helped that because Judd and Lewis, they're homies. Like, it gets to the point where Lewis confides in him and talks to him about his problems. And in the film, like I said, he's just that old man, that crazy old man. Also, in the 2019 version, Ellie, the little girl, her portrayal in the film, I didn't care for it. I didn't care for her at all. They just played her off as an average girl. There's nothing really unique or special about her. So, that again is a problem considering the plot where Ellie dies. We set the spoiler warning, so I still feel uncomfortable saying a spoiler. Like,
It's all good, Steven.
Ellie dies. She dies, and she's the reason that Lewis goes into the slippery slope of bad decisions and all these dreadful events that happen because he wants to bring her back. So her not having a real personality or anything special to her, that just kills it, right? And another thing that this movie didn't have is Norma. Judd's wife wasn't present in the film, and she plays a huge role in the story, but the film's just like, we're going to take her out. She's not important. We're not going to focus on that. But again, there's another problem there. Moving on to the third thing that I feel just is part of the reason why this film didn't hit with me is the violence and the type of scares. So it's obvious that the movie just wanted to skip all the essential exposition to get to the violent, and with air quotes, exciting scenes. However, when you get there, it's like censored. So, and I'm specifically referring to the part where Ellie kills Judd Crandall. She kills him, and yeah, you see when she stabs the scalpel into his ankle, and that part is pretty graphic. But then he falls, and she starts stabbing him, and you just see Church like meow, like just staring and like not doing any, and so all that is censored. Also, Ellie, her she looked not scary. So, if you're going for, because obviously this is a film that wanted to focus on, we're going to skip the exposition and just get to the exciting, scary parts. And Ellie did not look scary. Ellie looked normal. She just looked like she needed a bath.
Yeah,
So,
I agree.
those were the three main things that feed into the issue of the film having a lack of substance for me. And now that I just briefly described all that, I'm going to give my ideas as to what would have made it better. So when it comes in terms of pacing, this movie would have been better. One thing I would have done to change it is first of all not have that 1 hour and 40 minute length. And I know I'm eating my words here because I am a person who just hugely disagrees with those people that say, "Oh, this movie sucked. It should have been longer. Release the Snyder cut." I'm looking at DC fans specifically.
Oh.
Because I honestly, personally, before this film, used to believe you can't take a bad movie and make it better by making it longer. But Pet Sematary 2019 just changed my perspective on that completely. Because if this movie would have been longer and it allowed the directors and the crew to really focus on the things that were important, it would have been great. And I'd even venture to say that this story is beyond the film and could actually need a Netflix series in order for it to be turned into, to be portrayed the way I feel it's supposed to. But we're not the TV buffs or the Netflix buffs or the movie buffs, so we're going to stick to movies. I think this could have totally been at least a 2 hour and a half film. A 3 hour film if it needs to be, because there's a lot of exposition there that was left out. So, first thing I would do to make this movie better is one, increase the length of the film. Give yourself time to really focus on these characters. Give yourself time to really show what's important about them and why you should care about them. That's number one. So, repeating it one more time, make the movie longer. Second thing I would do, now that we have that time to really focus on these characters, One of the things that I would use with that extra time is focus on these side plots that were just left out. The two side plots I'm gonna focus on specifically is Rachel's sister Zelda. That needed to have more. Because yes, the film did talk about Zelda quite a bit, but it was just more like I had a sister who made my childhood sucky and she was sick and had a twisted spine and she wished the same thing on me. When there was so much more you could have done with that. Like, yeah, and again, I'm referring to the book, and I know that sometimes you have to change things to when you're adapting it to a film, but but there are still essential plot points that you need to keep. And one of those was that in the book, Rachel carries this huge guilt because she would pray for her sister to die, and when she finally did, she was happy. And there's like a whole chapter about talking about how happy she was that she was dead, that she didn't have to deal with this anymore, that her parents didn't have to focus on doing things for Zelda, and that Rachel finally felt like she could have a normal childhood. And the thing that stuck with her and the thing that made her feel guilty was every time that she felt a moment of bliss, it would immediately be tainted by the thought of Zelda. Because anything from the point that her sister died, she was like, every time that she had a happy thought or a happy moment, she's like, I'm having this happy moment because my sister died. Focusing more on that plot line in the film would have added more substance to it, especially since the entire film, the story, its recurring theme is death and how different people deal with it. So this was Rachel's idea of death, that not to say that this is entirely what was in her mind, but she had this perspective where sometimes it could be a good thing because it helped her, right? It helped her childhood. But then again, it didn't. So she has that conflict. So that for sure needs to be in there. Another thing I would do with the length of the film is include Judd's wife Norma. So for those of you who don't know, Judd had a wife. Her name's Norma, and Norma had arthritis, really bad arthritis, and it hurt her a lot. And when she found out that a doctor was moving in next door as a neighbor, Judd would go talk to Lewis and be like, "Oh, Lewis, like I hate to be this type of person, but could you check over my wife, see if she's okay? Her arthritis is acting up." And Lewis, being the good person he is, would agree, and that's how Judd's friendship with Lewis started, because Lewis would do things for Judd, would help his wife, and then through that, Judd started meeting the rest of the family, and Judd really ended up. The first word that came to mind was vibing. I don't want to use that word, but he really vibed with Ellie, because Ellie was this in the book, this really sweet, innocent girl who would just help Norma with everything that she couldn't do because when her hands would cramp up. So Ellie would volunteer her own time instead of going outside to play. She would go wash dishes for Norma. She would help her clean the rest of the house, help Norma knit. So, there was a lot going on there that, again, the movie just didn't have. And with these things, even I'm explaining it, but with the cast that they got for the film, and what I'm saying right now, picturing it in my mind, would have already, if we were just to take the film that we have now, the 2019 version, but just add the two things I just mentioned, I feel it would have already been better. Just flat out, that alone would have already helped. I'm not done though, because this can be better on a multitude of levels, so I'm going to continue. So we went through Judd Crandall, his wife, and his friendship with Lewis. We also went through the death of Rachel's sister, and now I'm going to focus a little bit more on Ellie. If this movie really did want to start showing the things about Ellie, because Ellie is an essential character, and in the book it is Gage, the one who dies by the truck. It's not Ellie, but I think it was a good decision. I don't want to say better. It's a good decision to have chosen the older sibling to be the one to pass, because you can work more with an older actor than with a younger one. So I know the 1989 version was true to the book and had Gage be the one who died and came back to life as an evil demon thing. And while it worked in the book and it worked in my imagination cinematically, it'd be kind of humorous to see such a little baby, 2, 3, or 4 year old, killing people with a knife and saying these grotesque, vicious, just terrible things to people. So yeah, so the fact that they chose Ellie instead of Gage, I think was fine. It's just in that case they needed to show more about Ellie then. Again, if Norma would have been present in this film, which I feel like she should have been, Norma in the book, spoilers, she dies, right? And when one day Ellie goes to Judd's house and says like, "Oh, does Norma need help with anything?" And Judd explains to her, "Well, Norma passed away last night," and that's Ellie's first real hit with death, and she's just like, "Oh my god," right? Like she doesn't know how to handle it. She cries a lot, and then like, as the events go on, she loses church as well. So death is just hitting her in all aspects, and I think that should have been shown in the movie as well to really show how she deals with things, because at that point with the things that I've mentioned, I feel that the audience would have cared for her a little bit more. So when Ellie has her death, a gasp would have actually been released by the audience, because to me, and again, this is opinionated, so I'm not saying that this is what would make the film better for everyone. It's what would make it better for me. You really need, it didn't have impact when Ellie died. There was no impact. Even in the funeral scene, you see everyone crying. There definitely needed to be more moments focusing on Ellie's character and Ellie's relationship with the people that care about her. The film did accomplish that with Judd a little bit, but again, like I'm saying, it could have been so much more. And in terms of violence and scariness and everything, why didn't they show the violence? Why did they try to keep that somewhat censored? I don't think that they should have. This movie is obviously rated R, and this movie wants to be something that has, you know, the way they advertise it really looked like that's what they were going for. Like, that parade of kids with the animal masks, with the drums, the boom 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 boom. It seemed like, oh shit, like, okay, this is taking a different direction. It's gonna focus more on scares and everything, but it didn't even really do that. Ellie, I feel, in order for it to have been more impactful, they could have made her look less normal. Like I said earlier, it looked like she just needed a bath, and that was it. She just needed a bath, and that was it. They could have totally made her skin look more rotten. They could have made her look scarier, less human, and more. I don't want to say zombie-ish, but more like she's already rotten. Because at that point, remember, the audience, if we're going the route that I'm taking, I believe that the audience would have cared for her more. And when you care for a sweet little girl, and then you see her all like basically deformed, it would hit different. And then from there, and it would hit different. And to see Lewis still be like, "This is our daughter. She's back. Oh my God, our daughter!" And it's the audience would be more like, "Oh shit, no, that's not your daughter." Which, I mean, yeah, they did kind of touch on that again, but again, like I've been saying, my biggest problem is that everything is just touching upon things instead of actually digging deep and really getting that strong reaction that they want from people, or that they were aiming to get from people. So those were the main things. I'm pretty sure I'm missing some things here, and I know that as we talk about it, I'll probably remember and just jump in. But those are the things I would have done to make things to improve this film, and to reiterate, it's going to be make the film longer, use that time to focus on Judd and Lewis's friendship, as well as introduce Norma and go into the characters of Ellie in order for the audience to care about her, and also a lot to do with Zelda. I feel like Zelda was underused in the film. And like I said, I know I'm missing something, but I'm gonna open the floor for discussion here, and we'll talk about it, and we'll see your thoughts on my improvements, and then from there, if let's just have a discussion about it.
All right, I'll begin the discussion by saying that I can agree with you on the movie where I just felt really uninterested in the side plots for Zelda, which is Rachel's sister, and I want to say his name is Victor Pascal.
Yes.
Yeah, I had no reason to care about them, like the whole thing with Victor, like why should I care about you just because Gage sees you, which just that really felt really uninteresting to me. And the whole thing with Zelda, like you said, I was just like, oh well, you just don't like your sister, and when she died you felt happy. I mean, cool. It didn't really have the same impact than how you said it right now, how the book implemented it and how you would do it in your movie. Yeah, I also strongly agree with how we should make Ellie be, not be, but like just look more deformed, I guess. I know that sounds terrible, but here it just looked like she was just like gray. Like they just took her and they just put gray on her, which I really didn't like either. And yeah, but making it longer, I don't know, 2.5 to 3 hours. I mean, I get if you want to touch on everything you wrote and you said here, but I don't know if that would interest audiences because you'd have to people get turned off by a 3 hour
Well,
movie.
like I said though, I feel like this story on the surface, yeah, it is scary. Monster in the closet, as Stephen T said
Hmm.
in his It Chapter 2 discussion. But it's not. Pet Cemetery is literally not about that. And a little backstory on that: Stephen King came up with the idea of Pet Cemetery when he almost had the same thing happen to his son. His son was running towards the road when a semi almost ran him over, and that's when Stephen King was like, "I have my next book idea." So the horrors of this film were really supposed to be the horror of losing someone and dealing with death and mourning, where I feel it was not advertised that way. And even if it would, even with the advertisements they had of it being this just like monster in the closet type of scare, they
Hmm.
still didn't do that either. So what were they trying to do?
Hmm.
To me, it was like you didn't hit what the book was trying to hit, and you didn't hit what you were advertising. So you just failed twice. Steven, do you have anything to say?
Yeah. Okay. So, referring to your changes and everything,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if like increasing the time length would make it better or making it into a TV show, as you said. I mean, you could, and you could expand on it a lot more with the story and the characters. Um, but I don't know. To me, I don't know if like necessarily you need 2 hours to tell this story because the story doesn't really like the story of Pet Cemetery. Because if anyone knows about Pet Cemetery, you know about, oh, the kid of two parents of a couple gets run over and then they bring him back. And in this movie, they do it like what, like the last 20 minutes of the movie. That's the plot. That's when the plot begins. So before that, you have to decide, okay, if the last 20 minutes is when the plot begins, what's our story before that? If it's 2 hours or an hour and 40 minutes, what are we doing for those first hour and 20 minutes? What are we doing for those first hour and 40 minutes, you know? Like I liked your idea of because I didn't read the book.
Mm-hmm.
I don't read Stephen King as often as my two friends here, but so I don't really know what Stephen King's story really is about. You know, whether or not it's really just meant to be a scary story where, oh, look, the parents, this couple, they lost the kid and they brought him back and it turned out to be scary. Or is it meant to be like the theme of it, like how you said the theme is death? You know,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't take it as that. Like this story very much reminded me of more like the theme being about grief, grieving the loss of someone, not just death itself, but how people process that, how people are haunted by it, you know, to the point where if you could, would you bring your daughter back or your son back? You know, and if you do, are you ready to, you know, confront the consequences of that because you're not able to move on from it? You know,
Mm-hmm.
there's a short story, The Monkey's Paw. Have you guys heard of it?
Yes, I've heard
the
about it. Yeah.
the monkey's call. The
Monkey's Paw. The
Paul.
paw.
No,
Yeah.
I actually haven't.
Okay, it's basically almost the same thing. It's like an old story where they're two parents, a couple, and you know their child dies or their son dies, and they decide to wish their son to be back, but you know he died and everything. So when he comes back, he's basically a walking corpse, you know, and it's meant to be scary. Like, you know, would you really do this? It's meant to be like kind of like you're kind of meant to move on. Yeah, these things happen, and it's life, but you need to learn to be able to accept what happened and kind of forgive yourself for what happened and move on. So I feel like this film should have focused not only on grieving, but also on the horrors of being a parent, or rather, like the scares. Like you don't want to lose your children. Like that's I think like the worst fear of a parent. Losing their kid. And I feel like that's to me that's what I would have focused on. And really showed these and not be like, oh, immediately once they get to the house, strange and things start happening and everything. I didn't the Norma thing. I kind of do see that as being okay taking her out because, well, I know in the film they made it seem like Judd, like he would. I don't know, like if he was like a bad person. I don't know. Did you guys get that?
In the movie, he seemed like he was just gonna be this crazy old man that lives next door.
No, yeah, but like at the end when Ellie's about to kill him, she says, "I know what you did to Norma" or something. He was like, "Shut up! Like don't like." Oh, what did he do? Like there's something there. Like maybe he's not that good of a guy or something.
Yeah, no,
I don't know
yeah,
if you guys.
I see what you mean. I remember that scene, which
Mhm.
that I mean, I think that's more. And again, this is coming from someone who has knowledge from the book. I think that was just more taunting.
Oh, okay. Well, I kind of took it like that. I like. Oh, well, the film kind of set it up like it was trying to say something about Judd. Like maybe there's more to him than you think. And I think it would have been like I guess I don't know. We're not doing this, but like my interpretation would be like, yeah, sure. Like Norma, she's not really needed. You can use that character for so, to build someone else up. Like I think what the film tried to do with these characters is have them experience death in their own way with other people. So like Lewis experiences Victor. Victor dies on his like he tries to save him, but he couldn't. Rachel, it's Zelda. Zelda died because she wanted her to, and then Judd, Norma died. Like it's three characters that we are really following most of the movie, not counting Ellie, that deal with death in their own way. And then when they all three of them lose Ellie, it's meant. I think it should have been something there where it's like, dang, it really did get to them even more. But I don't know. I feel like I mean that's something that I would have done.
So
You
yeah,
know.
but like taking the film as is, but if we just implemented what I said about making Ellie have more personality and show more scenes with her relationship with these characters, when she did die, I think we would agree that just adding that it would have more impact, and Ellie's death having more impact, having the movie as is, but again with that additional impact would have already made it a little bit better.
Um, for your movie, yes, 100%. I would say that. But I was gonna say like for my because like yours is death, right? Like the theme would be death,
Yeah, so
and
if I had to compare, because I know that you said like, oh, making it longer also wouldn't work, but the way that I'm seeing it and the way that I interpreted it when I read the book, if I had to compare Pet Cemetery to something else to sort of just get that understanding, is like Titanic. And I know, let me explain
okay,
that. Let me explain that a little bit. So when you watch Titanic, you know that it's all gonna lead up to when the boat is sinking, right?
yeah,
So that's but in Titanic there's like a whole bunch of other story. You got Jack and Rose and the social commentary between them and stuff like that, right?
yeah.
That's what Pet Cemetery is. Pet Cemetery is has this theme of death, and yeah, now that you brought it up, also grieving, and it ends with, well, not ends, but it leads up to that whole thing of bringing in the book Gage back to life. So and there's also throughout the book there's when Gage does die, he has a lot of these conflicting feelings. Like he knows it's wrong to do this, and he has to constantly Lewis has to constantly tell himself, I can't do this. I'm not doing this. This is wrong. Where in the movie, Ellie dies and Lewis is like, I'm gonna go.
Well, I think it's because in the movie they did kind of. I mean, that was like immediately after she died. You kind of knew like, oh, he's gonna go bury her in the pet cemetery, like they did with church. You know, like it. They didn't set that up for nothing. It was kind of like, yeah, that's where we've always been going. And but the problem I had with the film is that it never really felt like Lewis, like he would be that type of person to want to bring people back from the dead. And I think they tried to do that with Victor, but I think they failed on it.
I agree.
You know, because he's a doctor, and even though he tried to resuscitate him and like bring him back, it's like, well, that's what you're supposed to do. It's not like you met him on a staircase and he passed away and then you tried to do it because you can't accept people dying or whatever. It's like that's your job. So I don't think it did a good job on that part for me in the movie, but you know.
No, yeah, I
But
agree.
I was gonna say, because like how you said with Ellie needing more of a bigger part, for me I wouldn't have put Ellie. I mean, I would still keep Ellie as the person, as the child who dies, because she is older. And I think like when Stephen King wrote this, he probably picked Cage because of his own son,
Hmm.
right?
Yes.
And but then if you were to watch it now, I mean, easily the thing is that people will forget how you know, they will forget how they will act in real life versus them just yelling at the movie. So when Chucky in Child's Play is running after someone, you're watching the movie, you're going like, just punch the fucking thing. Like, just kick him. He's small. Rip his arms off. It's so easy, you know. But you don't put yourself in that situation. So I think that if you're watching the movie and you see this little kid coming to you, immediately your first thought is to like, I'm gonna drop kick this dude right now. This little baby. I'm gonna cut off his head or whatever. Like, you start saying all this stuff because you're like, yeah, he's evil. The audience knows he's evil, but the characters in the movie don't. So I think that immediately you have to take that out, because Ellie, she can speak. She's able to communicate more. So it's rather hard to say that, oh, she's dead when she's clearly like alive. You know what I mean? That's why I think it was a better decision for them to kill off Ellie than Gage. But I
Hmm.
do agree with you. Why the hell didn't they show violence in this? It's rated R.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
it feels like they only dropped one F bomb in here. You know? Like, I didn't even hear that many people saying anything. The only, like, yeah, when she's like killing Judd, there's like, you see like it's a split second. You see like the tendon like get cut, and then that's it. You know, but he's not even in that much pain, so it doesn't feel like he's even suffering. And then when he stabs him, you don't really hear anything. You just hear like, uh. You know,
Yeah.
like that's all. It's like he's getting punched or something.
No,
You
and
know?
not only that, it also right now that you are talking about Ellie and how she talks and she's clearly alive and everything. Uh,
Hmm.
it reminded me of something else that I would have added in the movie. That again, the movie just barely touched upon, but the book did, really expanded on it. And that is that the demon that comes back in the body of, well, I mean, it is Ellie in the movie, and in the book it is Gage, but like they're like demonized, I guess you can say. And
Yeah.
these in the book, the demon knows how to play with Lewis and Judd and their feelings. So Gage straight up starts acting like Gage, and so there's a scene where Judd is like gonna, like how you were saying earlier, like, oh, I'm just gonna kick this baby, or I don't know what, it's demon, it's not the same thing. And the freaking demon in Gage starts going like, why are you hurting me, and I'm gonna call my dad, and like start crying and like acting like an actual innocent like kid. And I feel
Hmm.
if they in the movie they barely touched on that when Lewis was going to like just, I think he was gonna decapitate Ellie with the shovel.
Yeah. At the end.
Yeah, and then Ellie's like, oh, but we can be a family. That was it. Like,
Oh yeah, that was stupid.
th-
At that point, you already know. Like, if you see, that's the problem. When you're the audience and you've seen so many of these movies, it's hard to be fooled again. You
yes.
know, because you already know, like, oh, they're faking it. It's not really. It's not her. It's whatever is in her pretending to be her. You know that, so you can't really, you know, be like, oh wow, dude, that's, oh, she's really, that's her. She's just misunderstood. No, that's a demon in there. Cut the head off with the head. You know?
They could have played on that more though, is what I'm trying to say. Like in It Chapter 1 when Pennywise was disguising himself as Georgie, something
Hmm.
like that. And I using that, I know it's already been used in It, but using that in the themes and everything going on with Pet Cemetery would have been more effective here.
No, yeah, I agree. And I think that but then also I think for me, the reason why you couldn't really, care for Ellie is because she was a horrible actress. Honestly, for me, this girl had no emotions. She just like didn't even like. Was she happy? I don't know. Was she sad? I don't know. She speaks the same way every single time, and it felt like they couldn't even, you know, it's like they didn't want you to care about her when she died, because they knew like, oh, when she comes back, you're gonna hate her, And it's like, well, like make us be confused, like, oh man, that's that little girl that was sweet and everything, but now she's acting like this. Maybe I shouldn't feel bad for wanting her to die, but then it's like, have those conflicting feelings. Put us in the shoes of the characters themselves. Like Lewis, he obviously probably had like some regret doing it, bringing her back and everything.
No, yeah, of
But
course.
there's no way to really feel for these characters because they don't even feel alive. They all felt like just, how can I say, like played out. Like we knew where this was going, and the characters did exactly what we were expecting them to do. You know?
I agree. Yeah, like it all goes down to that main issue that I said at the beginning. It just lacked substance, and the movie didn't make you care for any of these characters,
Hmm.
Yeah,
which
agreed.
is a huge waste because the cast, with the exception of Ellie, sorry Ellie, with the exception of Ellie, they were fantastic. I loved Jason Clarke in it. I loved John Lithgow, like them two, and I keep pointing them out because they're the main characters in the movie and they're the main characters in the book.
Yeah.
So, like, that's such a waste of talent, I think.
Mm-hmm.
David, you've been quiet. What are you thinking?
I'm trying to process everything being said here, and I totally agree. If they would have had something like in It Chapter 2, where Pennywise appears as Georgie, pretty much taunting, I want to say Billy or Bill?
Mm-hmm.
Bill, yeah. That would have been something dramatic, because the way they executed this in the 2019 version of this movie, it was just really poorly done. Because the audience, like Stephen T said, we just knew that it was fake. There was no, you couldn't even feel like, damn, imagine if I was doing that to my daughter. It's just, it was too late in the movie, I think.
For that scene specifically that we're talking about, where Lewis was gonna, I think, like I said, decapitate her with the shovel.
Mm-hmm.
She should have started acting like Ellie. The demon should have started acting like Ellie a lot sooner, and
Yeah.
have Lewis show the conflict and like, no, I know it's not you, so I'm gonna freaking kill you, and have Ellie like sobbing and being like, Dad, why are you doing this? To the point where it gets the audience being like, oh shit, this demon's going all out.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah, I agree. I would have had a bigger
Not
impact.
not only that, but for me at that point, it was kind of like this daughter of mine is acting too evil that it's clearly not my daughter. So I think that's the problem that the little girl, the actress, had too, because she was playing it like too evil,
Mm-hmm.
to the point where like her voice, her mannerisms, and everything. It's like this isn't a normal person. This is a demon right here, and it was. But the thing is that we're supposed to believe that it's her that gets brought back, and it isn't until who she says it to someone. I forgot who, but she basically says your daughter's in hell or something like that, right? You know?
she says it to Judd.
Mm-hmm.
Says that Norma's in hell.
No, no, but then she even says like I think someone says like you're not Ellie or something, and she goes like, yeah, Ellie's somewhere else, or Ellie didn't return or something. I don't know what. But they
That's what the mother said when Ellie kills the mom. I forgot her name.
Rachel.
When Ellie kills Rachel. Because Rachel says
Rachel.
you're not
Rachel.
my It's like you're not my daughter. And then that was the whole thing there.
No, yeah, but I think Ellie does say something about yeah, I'm not your daughter. Like I remember hearing it, I was like, oh, okay, so this is a demon. Like I've never read the what's it called, the book, and I've only seen the original movie, but like a long time ago, so I don't really remember it. But I didn't know that it was a demon that came back. I seriously thought it was just one of those like, oh, once you've been to hell, you're you become a sinner or whatever like that, and you come back. But it doesn't make any sense why a demon comes back if it's a child and children are innocent and they go to heaven. How is a demon able to possess the body of a kid? You know, like it's a lot. I'm not going to the science of it.
Mhm.
I'm not gonna be saying like, oh, explain it to me, doctor. No, I'm just saying like there's a lot of things that it's almost like they brought up and they didn't expand on it. And I think that's the main problem with the film. Like Victor is probably the biggest. Like, who the hell was he? Why did we like that dude could have been taken out, and it wouldn't have made a difference to the movie at all. You could have taken out those little kids wearing the mask that were drumming along and everything. You thought maybe they're gonna be a part of it. Nothing. You can take. It's meaningless. A lot of the stuff that happens in this movie is meaningless. That's meant to have meaning to the characters, but overall, it has no meaning to the film at all.
Well, I think the reason, and again, this is the thing that got me most upset. Again, being a Stephen King fan who loves the book, a lot of the things that you're saying are meaningless, have meaning in the book. But I feel like the movie was just like, we're gonna ignore all that, but we're still gonna put, I guess, hint like treat them as Easter eggs, so people from the book can be like the Leonardo DiCaprio meme and snap and point at the screen.
What?
What?
What was that reference you just did?
You've never seen those memes of Leonardo DiCaprio pointing at the screen from once
From The Great Gatsby?
from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood?
Oh. Oh, okay. I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the things that turned out to be meaningless in the film were just treated as Easter eggs, but they actually had actual story arcs in the book.
No, yeah.
Which
I see what you mean.
which I mean, if the movie needed to decide what it wanted to be. If it wanted to stray away from the book, then don't add the Easter eggs from the book and just make it seem like it's meaningless shit that's being scattered around this film. And if you were going to stay true to the book, if it was trying to stay true to the book, then stay true to the book, and those things that turned out to be meaningless add meaning to it. Like,
Well, I think that's the thing is that the filmmakers obviously thought about the film and they thought about I'm going to say the legacy, of the book being very much like, parents, their son dies and they have to bring him, and they decide to bring him back, but he's evil. I think they stuck with that premise more than worrying about anything else. I think everything else came before, like even the theme of the film, they thought about last. They're like, oh well, we're focused more on this, and we're focused more on making it scary, you know. And I think that's upsetting because you do see like potential there, and like you said, it's totally wasted, and a lot of it goes nowhere. If the book is better than the film itself, which I'm taking it uh, as it probably is, I'm gonna want to read the book now instead. But I don't. To me, like I said, one of my favorite actresses, Amy Semmets, is in this, and I was very much looking forward to her performance, and she did not disappoint. That's my favorite performance of the whole movie. I am being biased though. I know that.
no,
John Lithgow did really good too.
I can say that
Like, yeah,
Rachel's performance, it was great. It was great, especially that scene when Lewis presents Ellie to her, and she's like, "What do I do?" Like you can see that conflict on her face.
yeah, and
So
that's why it's like you have these great actors who can give you a great performance, but you're giving them mediocre or even like not good work, like not good subject matter. It should have been more, you know.
it should have. And I think
Hmm.
we keep circling to that. It just should have been more. I do want to hear a little bit of David because
Yes.
one thing David did end up liking this movie, and I think a part of that is because he hasn't seen the original film and he hasn't read the book. So this is his first exposure to this type of story. And
Yeah,
I am willing to say, and again, this is a super biased statement because I'm such a Stephen King fan. I'm
yeah,
willing to say that his story, King's story, is so good. Any interpretation of Pet Sematary, if it's your first exposure to it, you'll be like, "Hey, that's not bad. That's good." Like, yeah, the movie could have been better because I think David said that.
Yeah.
But I think you can't deny that having the story be there still makes it enjoyable to
Perhaps
an
I
extent.
enjoyed this movie because, like you said, it was my first exposure to it, and to me, this is the only way that a story like this exists. You know, like I don't know, I haven't read the book, I haven't seen anything about it. The only way that this story exists in my mind is through this movie. So the concept and everything with it, I just automatically tie to the movie.
Yeah, and the concept is good. I think we can all agree here. Even Steven, who thought the movie was boring, which I thought it was boring too. So even us who thought it was boring can agree that the concept is there and the concept is good and the concept is interesting.
I would want to say though that I actually thought that I was going to enjoy this movie though from the opening scene. That like helicopter shot of showing like the house on fire and like blood on the porch and everything, and looking at everything and just seeing like, dang, something went down here. And then the movie just starts. It's like, oh well, now you're gonna see how we got there. I was like, man, I'm excited to see what's gonna happen. And it was like the most boring thing ever. I think that opening kind of set up too much of the film because I thought it was brilliant, especially like the ominous sound
Hmm.
playing over it. You're like, wow, something happened here. I can't wait to see how this goes. And I feel like that set up the tone of the film. You know, of what you thought what I thought the tone of the film was going to be, like just chaos everywhere, out of control. You can't control any of the stuff that happens, and yes, there will be blood eventually, but there was almost none. You know, and the chaos is very minimal. You know, and there are moments that did make me kind of go like, oh, dude, like the part when they show Victor's brain and it's moving. I was like, oh, dude, that's crazy, you know.
Hmm.
But nothing that makes me go like, I mean, how the hell do you hit a kid with a truck and they're perfectly fine? They got a couple bruises on them, you know, like, you know how many kids I ran over? No, that is not realistic right there. But
No,
like, yeah, like, why she should have been splattered, you know?
yeah, and in the book they do describe that Gage comes back and he doesn't look normal. He doesn't look like a kid. He's just this demon looking, well, not demon looking, but like this deformed thing that was pieced back together.
Oh, so like I think it probably just followed the original movie then on that part, because in the original movie the kid gets ran over, but like when he comes back he's normal. The only thing that's different is that like I think he has like dark tones around his eyes, and I think he has like red hair instead of blonde hair, you know. But
Yeah.
like other than that, there's really there's no difference. You know, he looks intact.
Hmm.
You know,
Hmm. Yeah, well, a lot of things could have been done.
I
So
got a
many.
question for David though.
What's up?
I got a question for David.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
David, this isn't your first Stephen King movie though, right?
It is not. I've seen It and It Chapter 2.
Okay, compared to those, would you say that this movie is like as good as them? Not as good? Better?
Dude, both It movies are so much better than Pet Sematary. I mean, you can't compare.
No, okay. So no, I'm not trying to get to this point of like or of saying or making you say something you don't want to say, but I'm just trying to see like whether or not you can understand like because I think we can all agree that well, it chapter 1 is good. For me,
Hmm.
it chapter 2 is not good, as we discussed last time.
Hmm.
But as you, like you know, for you guys, you might be able to say like you and I, Steven, we both don't like this movie. David somehow did, but I wanted to know if like comparing it to another movie that we all enjoy, comparing it to that, you know, would you still say it's as good as that or something? You know.
I definitely can't say that Pet Sematary is as good as the It movies. I don't know the It movies just have a certain quality to them that it's just hard to replicate, in my opinion. I mean, Pet
Mhm.
Cemetery, I see its problems. I'm like, okay, but I can still have a good time watching it. But when I'm watching the first It movie, I have a lot of trouble trying to find any problems, and I'm just enjoying it. I mean, I'm having more fun. It's a better experience overall.
Mhm.
I have a question for you, Steven.
Okay, go ahead.
What would you say you enjoyed less? It Chapter 2 or Pet Sematary?
Oh man, you know, because like they're not different films in the sense of like because they both deal with they're both Stephen King films, but I think they're both bad adaptations of a novel that probably is better. You know,
Hmm.
um, but between both of them, I mean, it's because the thing I would say is like I don't want to watch either again. And every time I ask myself, like, well, would I watch this again? I say to myself, no, I wouldn't. There's no point. It's a bad movie. I didn't miss anything. Um, if you were to ask me which one would I rather see again, I'd rather see Pet Cemetery again. But
Whoa.
the reason why is time length because of the fact that like it chapter 2 is like almost 3 hours, and to me that's 3 hours of something I don't ever want to see again versus an hour and 40 minutes. Plus, Amy Semmets is probably like the only thing I really enjoyed in the film. So, and the fact that she's always there, I like I can be entertained by her performance, and also John Lithgow's. Whereas it chapter 2, there's really not much there for me to want to watch again.
Hmm.
You know, so I think I'd rather watch Pet Cemetery again, but they're both, in my opinion, just as bad.
There,
The way I look at movies, it's very like I need more than just if it's a horror movie, yeah, the scares are fine and everything, but what are you trying to say with this horror movie? Like what's the theme of it and everything. At least that's what I look for. I'm not saying everyone needs to think that way, but for me, like Pet Cemetery, how I said, like, oh, this should have been about the parents and how they deal with grief and what it's like, how unsafe it is to be a kid. Like things like that would have made it much better for me than just oh, a little girl came back and she's a demon. She's trying to kill you. Like isn't that scary? Not really. Because I've seen it. In other films. It chapter 2 again. It's like I don't have a fear for clowns, so that doesn't scare me. So it's almost like well, you should be doing something else that does scare people. Or makes people just go like I don't want to be in that situation. You know. But
yeah.
yeah.
And like the reason why I asked that is because I feel the way you feel about It Chapter 2 is how I feel about this movie. Because
Oh, okay.
when you dissected it, the main thing that you said is that it had no depth, no substance, no character. And when I was rewatching Pet Cemetery and I was making my notes for this podcast, I thought to myself, "Oh my God, is this how Steven felt about Pennywise, and is this how he felt about uh, It Chapter 2?" And I was like, "Yeah, probably."
Yeah, most likely it is that, and I mean, at least now you kind of see. But at the same time, I do want to stress that you love this novel. Like Pet Cemetery, you love it. I'm assuming, right?
Hmm. Yes.
Okay, so like, do you think that you're coming from this place of the movie is bad overall, or it's bad because it didn't follow the novel? The book is way better. You know what I mean? Like that, the thing that people say all the time, like, oh, the book is better,
Yeah.
even though the movie is good.
I would say.
Before you continue, roll this into your final thoughts, please.
Okay. 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 So, well, first to answer Steven's question, I would say that both, and let me explain that a little bit. So, both because the movie overall is bad. Because even if I didn't have knowledge about the book, I would still stay true to my comments about it moving too quickly, my comments about the violence, and my comments about not caring about the characters. So that put together would still make for a bad film. And when it comes to me thinking Pet Sematary 2019 is a bad film because compared to the book, that's because all the problems that I had with the movie, the book has solutions for it. So that's why. Do you see how I'm trying to answer this? Like overall, it's a bad
Yeah,
movie, regardless if I knew the book. But I love the book because all the problems I had with the movie, the book doesn't have.
I think I get you. Do you think that the book has problems though? Like that's what I'm kind of wondering now.
Oh no, yeah. I mean, the book does have problems, but it's a little bit harder to point out the problems in a book than it is for a movie because a book it takes you longer to read a book than to watch a movie. So I
No, yeah,
feel
I get you.
so I feel the problems are harder to be pointed out when, like, let's say there was an inconsistency between chapter 1 and chapter 40 and you read chapter 1 like 3 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago. So you know it is harder, but there are some problems in the book. It doesn't hit you as hard though. And again, the reason why I'm explaining it this way is because I'm not sure if the plot, because I'm sure there's plot holes. If the plot holes are just that insignificant or that small that you can ignore them, or if it's because it's different when you're reading a book than watching a movie. So I can't really answer that all that fairly and all that true.
Oh, okay.
But to roll this into my final thoughts, yeah, that was so. Those were the things that I would change for Pet Cemetery. Again, the main issue was just it needed more character, needed more development, and needed us to the audience to care more because it had no substance.
All right, Steven, do you have anything to roll into your final thoughts? Steven T, that is.
Yeah. I totally agree with Steven. This movie definitely could have been better, and you do see that in the film. You very much see like the potential of this film, which is what I said before, and it's kind of sad because the problem with studios nowadays, they'll make a movie and like based on a book, and then if that book is very successful, like it was the reboot, they're gonna be like, oh, let's reboot all of Stephen King's films and let's do more. I mean, well, reboot Stephen King's films, but also adapt his other works. And if those don't do so good, then they just like, oh, then I guess people don't really care for Stephen King, and they don't bother making them anymore. And sadly, like if they start like toning down with Stephen King adaptations, I would blame Pet Cemetery for that. And also because like It Chapter 2, even though I didn't like it, a lot of people did and it made a lot of money, you know? But with Pet Cemetery, I just feel like, it totally missed the ball on what it should have been. And hopefully it doesn't affect other films because like Doctor Sleep, which I love, didn't make that much money either, and they're kind of like not paying attention to a lot of that stuff. It feels like they're just gonna stick to Stephen King being on TV from now on, and it's really a shame because from what everything Stephen C told me about Stephen King, his stories can be very, very iconic and very memorable to watch in a film. And if we don't get that anymore, that'd be very upsetting.
I do agree. I'm gonna roll this into my final thoughts on this as well. That it may be possible that we just stopped getting Stephen King novel film adaptations or just reboots of old movies because 90% of the population forgot about The Dark Tower, which, if I'm not wrong, had Idris Elba in it. No one really
And Matthew
cared.
McConaughey.
And Matthew McConaughey, no one really talked about it, of my knowledge. So, yeah, I agree with everything that's been said here. That would totally be a better movie. Really lengthy movie that I don't think I would watch too often because I'm really turned off by very long, what's the word I'm looking for, long feature films. But yeah, that's great. And that concludes this episode of our podcast where we had Stephen C and Stephen T talk about Stephen King.
Oh, three Stevens,
So,
go buy a lottery ticket.
yeah, we hope you enjoyed this episode of the podcast. Please tune in next Friday for our next episode, and I hope you have a wonderful week till then. So, later.
See ya.
Bye.